Ladies and gentlemen, we have invited Mr. Sanjeev Datadin. I know he's had a long and tiring day today, but we have invited him to join us tonight to talk about what transpired at the CCJ today. But before we get to that, we have some pressing matters that I would like to have a little brief discussion that will include Mr. Datadin, of course. But at the top of this program, ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, for the past 120 days, we have heard about sanctions. We have heard about threats. We have heard every world leader all around the world threaten that if you do not do this, there will be sanctions. Ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you, CARICOM said Guyana could be kicked out of CARICOM. Commonwealth, we could be banned from Commonwealth. All across the world, there has been threat of sanctions. And let me tell you this, whether the Granger administration admits it or not, sanctions have already been imposed, ladies and gentlemen. The oil money, we cannot touch the oil money unless there is a legitimate government in place. They have already imposed sanctions. But more importantly, Mr. Granger, listen up, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, pay careful attention. That tune has now changed. Instead of the world leaders saying there will be sanctions, it has changed. Today, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, has given instructions to his staff to investigate those who are holding democracy at bay. Ladies and gentlemen, let us be careful to not take these words idly. And I wish to urge, let me repeat these words. Mike Pompeo says, I have instructed my department to ensure that those who undermine Guyana's democracy are held accountable. I would like to ask Kevin to let us please play that couple minutes, 3-4 minutes recording, so that all across Guyana and the Caribbean and wherever you're joining us from, if you missed that short speech by Pompeo, here it is.
This week to condemn the Maduro regime's attempts to suppress independent political parties in Venezuela. Our region has categorically rejected the attempts to create a phony Maduro-friendly opposition. The United States also congratulates the people of Suriname in their elections and a peaceful transition of power to a new National Assembly. We look forward to working with that new government. In contrast, it's now been 4 months since Guyana's election, long past due for a peaceful transition of power. CARICOM and the OAS have certified the recount results. They should get on with it. I've instructed my department to ensure those who undermine Guyana's democracy are held accountable. Also today, the USMCA comes into effect. It will open up new opportunities for U.S., Mexico,
and
business.
So the critical words there, ladies and gentlemen, I have instructed my department to ensure that those who undermine Guyana's democracy are held accountable. Leonard, in your mind as a senior journalist, sir, has the intonation, has the words and the import that they present, has it changed, sir?
It's definitely has changed. If you would have been following very closely, and as in the media we've been following very closely the language, and you got to look at the language and the tone. From day one, let's have peaceful election. From day two, adhere to the declarations. Here it is that he's saying very clearly, and we're looking at the escalation of the words. I think those are what it's being described as. To now, the Department of State has been instructed to go after those who are accountable. It is very, very serious. Take it as very, very serious. I don't think this is a threat. It is a very serious thing. He said it's more than almost 4 months. It's more than almost 120 days. It is very serious, Yog.
And again, I mean, sorry to keep you waiting a little bit, Council. We're going to certainly open to you just now. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you of something else. And it's important we have this at the top of this program because we need to understand how things are changing. A couple of days ago, both Leonard Gildari and I on our daytime elections watch, we said that it took a phone call or two and we see words changing. Well, today, Mr. David Granger has said that he cannot concede until a declaration is made. He suddenly starts to realize that there are words like concede in the dictionary. At least he's learned the word today, Council. But ladies and gentlemen, in addition to starting to use the word, Mr. Granger, sir, thank you for recognizing concede. He has also said something that is amazing, Leonard. He has said that he cannot concede or claim victory. He said he cannot concede or claim victory. Yet he and his party from day number 3 were hiding behind the skirts of their SOPs and claiming they won victory. Ladies and gentlemen, last week, Granger's men went around this country using state vehicles, sharing pamphlets, claiming that they won these elections. So this fabrication coming from the highest office, I must say, my personal view is this is an insult to all of us. I'll tell you what else. He has said that when the chairman is ready to make a declaration, he said he does not know when the elections commission will declare, and that the chairman, when she is ready, will make a declaration. Mr. Granger, sir, you and your party has interrupted the work of the commission at each and every step of the way. In case you forget, it is your man Mingo who did the first blatant attempt at rigging, and he did it again a week later. And it is your political party who went and took the CARICOM agreement to court, and it is your political party who is now doing this nonsense again. So, Mr. Granger, these words, the verbiage you have been spewing today, is cause for great concern. But at least I will concede, sir, that you have used the word concede, and congratulations for that. Counsel, what is in your mind? Good evening. What was in your mind when you saw Pompeo's statement this morning, sir?
Good evening, Yog. Good evening, Leonard. Good evening to all your listeners. Council. Good evening to my beautiful wife, of course. Yog, what was happening is, at first, I will tell you the honest reaction. The proceedings, as you know, were in the Caribbean Court of Justice today, and while it's going on, you're doing various things of keeping notes, trying to keep track of what's been said, whether having a look that we have countered things, our submissions covered the point, you know, the usual things you do. Mm-hmm. And I got repeated messages of the Secretary of State said something, the Secretary of State said something. So I didn't get a look at it right away, but then I had a look at it and I saw what was in news report about what was said. And my first reaction was to speak to one of my colleagues, Mr. Nandlal. And I said, have you seen it yet? He says, not really, but apparently they said something. We're going to look at it. So we try to find a window during the process to actually check what was actually said. I am no expert in the area, but I can tell you, Yog, this is how it usually would work. The State Department is really, they have a very high-level team that would make these decisions about sanctions and what to be done. They would, of course, react in many cases on their own information, on information that they receive from the diplomats they have posted in the country, usually via diplomatic cables, or in some cases, they actually obtain information by themselves. They would usually, before they do anything, they would have to have independent information in relation to what they had. But if you look historically, and this is simply from doing a search online and just look at sanctions and historically where sanctions have been imposed, you will notice that the usual thing that happens before sanctions are imposed is the one before always has a particular wording. For example,
Yes.
I have instructed. It's usually sometimes, and this is only going from the very basic research that I was doing about how it works. And a lot of times you would see it come from the Secretary of State, and it's usually echoed by the president, which would usually, the president usually says he's instructed the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State would usually say, we are now investigating. Those are the terms that they use. Now, it appears to me that when they kind of say investigating, it might not mean what you and I think investigating mean. It kind of means that we are putting together a list sort of thing. Because usually, as I said, the information related thereto has been independently obtained or to their satisfaction of the Secretary of State has been obtained. Now, it would now be the details of the who and the what connections and how they intend to do it. Now, if you look at personal sanctions, for example, and simply looking at the way England and the US have imposed personal sanctions, for which information is much more easily available online because there's a little bit more transparency about how they do it. For example, the United States has sanctions against some countries, for example, Venezuela, and they do Iran similarly. And basically what happens is the leaders of that country and the country's assets are frozen. Their trading ability is zero without specific permissions. The people connected thereto, meaning the employees' families in many instances, the employees' businesses, what they have involved, the upper management of most of those businesses. So as a result of that, that keeps going. What should I say? It basically, it is not intended to only punish the actual wrongdoer in many cases, but it goes to your immediate circle of people around you. Correct. And by doing the immediate circle of people, that's where the real pressure comes. Because those people are going to tell you, well, what are you doing? And why are you doing this? And why are you causing these things to do? But the stage today is a vastly different state than we were before this statement was made. For example, from yesterday, there is a vastly different thing about what's going on. Right. And we have to realize this. It now means that the United States have taken a concrete decision about the imposition of sanctions. And they have indicated and they have said to everyone that this is the reason why we're doing this. Correct. So I don't believe that there's a secret anymore. That's the first thing. The second thing, which I thought was quite odd, was, as you pointed out in your introduction, following that statement, I then saw a statement from Mr. Granger. Now, I was, of course, otherwise occupied for most of today, but it appears to me that Secretary Pompeo said the things he said. And then after that, I saw a news report saying about that Granger is saying that he can't concede without a declaration from GCOM. But, I mean, with great respect to him, there is effectively a position from GCOM. Correct. And that position from GCOM is reflected by what happened, as we know. And if we look at it step by step, you will realize that GCOM has in fact stated what they are wishing to state pretty much already. For example, the report that was originally submitted by Lowenfield following the recount was received by the commission, and the commission, principally the chairwoman, she said, you are to now produce a report to the commission in accordance with Section 96 of the Act, and you are to use the recount data. The court proceedings in the Court of Appeal, which is still ongoing, the David versus GCOM case, was filed, and Mr. Lowenfield took it upon himself to discard 115,000 votes.
Correct.
So GCOM has pretty much indicated, and they are clear. I understand the true, there must be a declaration. I accept that. But there is really a declaration already. There is the foundation, the structure, and the position for Granger to say, I concede. Because if the chairwoman has instructed that what the report that is submitted be the report that of the recount data, Yog, you know the recount data. Leonard has published it, all the recount data. He's published it in great detail on his Facebook page. So we all know what the recount data is.
Right.
So what's the problem? But I am, in my mind, my idea is there is a connection between the apparent softening of the stance by Granger that he will concede once there is a declaration and the comments of the Secretary of State. I sincerely think the two things are connected.
Right.
Now, I don't want to presuppose, because I have no knowledge personally that the two things are related. But I am saying that it is clear softening of the stance by Mr. Granger. But I'm sure tomorrow you're going to hear from those that are willing to fight on, quote unquote, within the APNU coalition, that they would have other statements to say too. So I don't know anymore what to think. But we have to remember a few things. Sanctions are not something, and do not take it to be that sanctions are what anyone, including the PPP, as far as I'm aware, wishes upon Guyana. No one is fighting that this is what happens.
So
what it is people are saying, look, the people who are doing wrong here, who are subverting the will of the people, we have to find a way to make them do the right thing and to be answerable, because otherwise they're not.
So just, ladies and gentlemen, just to be, clear here, a couple of things that we have seen happening over the past week. Everybody, last night when we were in room 592, we spoke about Mr. Greenwich's statement that he made, Carl Greenwich's statement, asking his own political party to stop beating up on the world. He has spoken very clearly about what he thinks, what they should do. Then we saw today Mr. Pompeo would have made, and Mr. Counsel, Attorney at Law, Mr. Datadin, has highlighted something very, very important, ladies and gentlemen. When we hear all this talk about sanctions, we got to remember sanctions are multi-layered, multifaceted. There are sanctions that are imposed against a country, like what the United States would have imposed against Cuba and Iraq and other places in the world. But there are also personal sanctions, like what they have imposed on Venezuela. Venezuela, as you know, they had imposed sanctions, personal sanctions against, I think, 13 or 14 members of the Venezuela, the Maduro government since July last year. And those sanctions, a week ago, they added people to the list, and the list keeps on growing. So it is important to see also, ladies and gentlemen, that Mike Pompeo would have said today that he has already instructed his department. So obviously, as a people, we have to now be careful. We don't want anybody here to face sanctions, but of course, at the same time, those who have held this country at ransom for 120 days, willfully knowing they have lost these elections, willfully knowing they have engaged in mischief of its highest order. The mischief knew no bounds, ladies and gentlemen. I want to remind you, they planned. They went into the recount with a fishing expedition. There has not been a single proof that has been tendered that these elections were rigged by anybody else other than APNO AFC. Not one bit of evidence has been tendered to public place. All they're doing, they continue to use state funds, state assets, and they're presently even selling out state lands. Every passing week is a week in which taxpayers are at risk because they continue to earn their salaries paid by taxpayers, and they continue to use and abuse state assets. So I just wanted to draw that distinction, ladies and gentlemen, because it is important we understand this thing about personal sanctions and countrywide sanction against a country, sorry. And let me just say this. I have heard APNO FC personnel say, what sanctions? Bring it on. Like what they said at the no confidence motion. Bring it on. We don't need anybody. We don't need anything. And you know what? What irks me is that these people are still wanting to borrow money from the international bodies. We still need to use the International Court of Justice to settle our border matters. We still want foreigners to come pump our oil out. We still need everybody, but we don't want them to have an opinion on good governance or bad governance or rotten governance as what is happening in Guyana and what has happened for the past 2 years, well, 5 years. So we need to get this clear. Now, here is a question, Council, and I want to get to the elections in a hardcore way tonight because I'm afraid, you know, we have a serious blow dealt to us. And that is because compliments of APNO AFC, this election declaration keeps being kicked down the road, down the road, down the road. Council, as a people, we are calling on GCOM to disclose, and we are calling on Lowenfield to disclose where and what ballot boxes he invalidated in his current report that has not been withdrawn as yet. Mr. Lowenfield and GCOM, Madam Chairman, as a people, we are calling on you to disclose to the people of this country what ballot boxes you have decided to discard and invalidate, because, Council, as a people, we want to hire you. Pro bono, mind you, pro bono. We need to take action. I need my vote to count in these elections. I and people like me, we need our votes to count. Is it a fair demand, the Council?
It is. But one of the things you have to realize, Yog, is this. One of the things that we have to remember through this entire process is GCOM is the statutory body in Guyana responsible for this election and for going forward. GCOM has to make the declaration. GCOM has stated very clearly all of the objections you wish to make have to be made after we have made the declaration. And once we have made the declaration, you're free to go ahead and do what you want to do. Now, so it's GCOM's decision. And I believe that GCOM has already said, submit your report to Lowenfield in accordance with Section 96 and use the recount data. It can't be any clearer. Now, Lowenfield has done what he has done to remove 115,000 votes. But to say that GCOM has done that is not entirely true. Because what has happened is, as far as GCOM has done, the last time I was here, you had put up on the screens all an example of the recount statement, the tabulated. And it does say valid votes. I mean, the word valid is in fact used. And for whatever reason that that Lowenfield thought he got guidance, quote unquote, from the decision in David and GCOM. But the court gave no guidance about that in the Court of Appeal. And that was, in fact, admitted by Harman's attorney. That's not a disputed fact. So if they didn't give any guidance, then what guidance was he using to simply lose 115,000 votes? Like you said, we don't know where these votes have come from. We don't know which ballot boxes. No one knows these things. And I don't believe that, I know that the commission does not know where this has come from. This has come from Lowenfield with the very false belief that he has, that he is solely and entirely entitled to make up things as he go along and to do what he wants, because it says solely on his advice, which is a total bastardization of what the intention of the statute is. But we have the position where GCOM has directed him what to do. And, you know, he's been instructed to do a specific thing. And he wants to do his own thing.
Let me push back at you. Look, we cannot, and this country, I don't think we are ever going to forget these 120 days and counting. It might be 100, and it might be Lowenfield's 156 days before we are finished. He might very well get his wish. Look, March, was it 6th or 7th, and then March 13th. The commission, March 6th, thank you. The commission knew exactly the nature of its problem. Lowenfield, whatever the chairman is instructing now, could have instructed then. Go ahead.
Yeah, but not cutting you, Yog. Do we see, because things have moved so quickly and they are, do you remember that the European Union Observer Group, the European Union Observer Group, in accordance with their statutory rights, had written to the Commission and asked to have access to the SOPs that they had.
Correct.
And I am not sure whether it has been dealt with at all, whether they have received a refusal or it has simply not been addressed. But we remember when that was done, and when that was done, it was a statutory right of an international observer group, but that was a right they had by statute. We have a statute called that relates to overseas elections observers, and that has not been complied with as far as I know. I don't know if there was a formal denial or it has just fallen by the wayside and never actually received a response. It is effectively a denial. And you're right, if that was done at that stage, then might have saved us a lot of time. But we have to realize that what has happened is events were overtaken. When the two leaders said to Prime Minister Motley of Barbados that we would agree to a recount and CARICOM can have an observer status at it and a significant... there was hope in Guyana. There was a lot of hope. Then when it was said that what would happen when the count got underway and everything was undergoing, it was said, well, you know, CARICOM the proper or logical interlocutor into what is going on, and we will abide by what they say in their report. But their report was clear. They're of the unshakable view that the recount numbers represent the will of the people and is the foundation upon which a declaration can be made. That was those are their words. But that hasn't happened yet. And in echoing that sentiment, I believe GCOM has said very clearly to Lowenfield that you need to present your report in accordance with the recount data and not the other things that you've been considering about whether or not every person if a box has one problem, right, you discard all the votes and these sorts of things. When we have begun down a road, in my mind, from the no confidence motion, where we would say one thing, well, the government would say one thing and do exactly the opposite, and then set about with their keyboard warriors and their newspaper and the media to convince you and their followers that the thing that they are doing is in fact the thing that complies with the law, when the two things are two diametrically opposed things. Correct. And they keep doing that. For example, today one of the things that was said by Granger was that when he was asked a question, President Granger, he said they never claimed victory. Yeah. And they never said anything about victory. When in reality, 2 nights ago or 3 nights ago, he was on a radio station. And on that radio station, he expected everything to wrap up by weekend, and he expected the declaration to be made. Before then, he made the clear indication that on the last, on the radio station, the part that about declaring victory, he said he had full faith in Lowenfield's numbers. That's right. And he accepted that was so. And when it was Mingo's numbers, Apnew said, swear in Granger that these are the things. He went on camps on Lamaha Street, where there had been a party base of sorts in Georgetown. And he was there to say that we have won, we have fought a hard fight, and we have been rewarded, and the people have voted for us, and we have won. So to say that he did not say, or Apnew did not say that they had won the election is not true. It's simply not true. But you look at what will happen. There will be all these spin doctors who are going to come and say, well, oh, they never said it, never said it. Then you will show them video clips. You will show them newspaper articles where they are quoted as saying exactly that. And they will say, well, oh, this is the fake media, this is people who doing this. And if you get into a discussion with any of those persons, you will have to spend an hour trying to explain basic meaning of language because they simply take a contrarian position. Correct. Now, that must come to an end. I don't understand. For example, it was a few days ago that Kaichur had the headline about the sale of the land. I think it was 108 acres. And they went through the whole detail about the sale of the land. When you looked at what they was posting on social media and from the very clearly political blogs that are writing or spewing apparent news on behalf of Apnew, they were saying things that are so ridiculous and saying that Kaichur never said it was 108 acres, that the headline that was put out and the front page that was put out was fake, right, and that there was actually something different. Right. about it.
But it has always been about the verbiage, hasn't it? It's been changing the narrative one way or the other. And sorry to interject, Council, because another very important thing happened today that I want to remind everyone of, and it's a negative. Um, Usually, ladies and gentlemen, across the world, people who are mayors, head of their municipalities, the various mayors of, let's say, various cities in America or any country, they would normally, and it's historical. Mayors have endorsed a candidate, mayors have endorsed somebody or endorsed the other person. It seemed to be something very big overseas. But what we have found in Guyana is that the mayors, at least how many of them, 5 or 6 of them, according to the newspapers, according to the department, sorry, not the newspapers, according to the Department of Political Information, the mayors have gotten together and are calling for Granger to be sworn in. They don't care about a declaration. They don't care that Granger and his party and them all, they are rigging these elections, but they're asking for Granger to be sworn in. And ladies and gentlemen, these are the head of your municipalities. You have all voted them to be where they are. This country, we all have to realize the power to put the politicians where they are is not in them, it is in your hands. The power of the ballot, which the current government, the incumbent, is trying to rob you of. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, all the mayors, all the political persons that have appointment one way or another, they depend on your ballot, on your vote. And I would want to ensure, I am going to put up Mr. Gildard for the next mayor, maybe. I want to ensure, jokes aside though, that we remember the power that lies in the hands of the electorate.
I'm not a
Sorry
pandit.
to have cut you there, Council.
I'm not a pandit.
Leonard, did you see the press releases from the Department of Political Information? Those are my words. I know you would be careful using but it's DPI, Department of Political Information, about the mayoral demands for the swearing in of Granger?
I did see something a couple days back, and I think there was a statement saying that that's from him and not from his office afterwards.
No, sir. Today's release on the Department of Political Information website.
Oh, they put it up today.
Yes, it has it there. Mayor, Georgetown's mayor, Bartica's mayor, Gifford Marshall, Madia's mayor, David Adams, Linden's mayor, Wanika Arindel, and New Amsterdam's mayor, Winifred Hayford, has called, and called is in quotes, for Granger to be sworn in. That is on the website, paid for by the taxpayers of this country. That is what they're doing with your taxes, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry to go off on a tangent there, Council, but I want to come back to what's happened today.
I got to tell you, Yog, I'm taking that from now on. Department of Political Information. I think.
But before you
you had Leonard looking a little funny because he was like taken aback. He was going,
No, I actually was taken aback because he's offering me to take the position of the mayor of Georgetown. So I mean, but yeah. I want to come back quickly, Council, to that issue of sanctions. Has the wheels that have started turning already? Could it be stopped at this point in time? Let's say that there's a concede, if the Americans are taking it that the coalition is not doing what it's supposed to do and it's thwarting the will of the people. Has the wheels that have started turning already, could it be stopped, or regardless what happens?
My guess is if there is a concession and we are to move to a government with the will of the people, yes. But if there is no such concession and the will of the people continue to be thwarted, it will go, I think it will go very quickly. Mm-hmm. It will move forward to a place where it is going to be unpleasant. And let me explain to you a little bit. I've been checking. I know what the statutes say, and I can tell you, but the reality is a little different from the statute. This is what happens, right? For a small country like Guyana, every time you would go to the bank, especially if you're a businessman and you do a wire transfer, you are going to have more difficulty. Every time you receive money, you're going to have more difficulty. And the reason is it's a very small country. So it's very easy for one of the persons who are clearly involved in the rigging of the election or the denial of the will of the people. And so you could go to your neighbor or your friend in small countries. And so that everybody is going to be met with this thing of having to provide all of the proof to show that you're not really a trustee or a conduit for the movement of the illegal monies. Now, in addition to which, then comes the other part. There is no banking possible out of Guyana that does not go through a bank, an intermediary that is in the United States. Now, even if you use an intermediary in Europe or in Asia, I'm sure that the bank would have a branch in the United States, and therefore they are subject to it. Then would become all the economic pressures that come with sanctions. When it becomes difficult for you to move funds, it becomes difficult for you to generate funds. It becomes more difficult for you to sell your products, because anything that the government is going to benefit from is going to be sanctioned. So the government now will have the problem. But in small countries like ours, the government is involved in so many of the stages that go on. Now, what would happen is exports are going to be affected. Exports are affected, foreign currency coming in is affected. Less foreign currency, more pressure on the dollar, the exchange rate goes up. The exchange rate goes up, then poor me and Leonard got to pay a much higher exchange rate for everything. So you see, it's not as simple, because these personal sanctions, of course, they're going to be targeted at the people who are involved and will affect them to the greatest degree. But it means an across-the-board thing in Guyana. And the thing about it is, honestly, I find it disingenuous for President Granger to publicly say that he cannot concede until GCOM makes a declaration, when every person in this country knows who won that election. And all of the stories, all of the narrative being created about migrant or dead voters, there is no proof of it. And we have seen Kaichor News, for example, and Stabrook newspapers have done articles upon articles upon articles about just how little are they willing to provide any information. And in the absence of any information, and in the absence of any evidence, how could they go on in this way? And the sad thing is, they are lying to their supporters. And they are lying to fate. All that is remaining now are the really faithful supporters. The people who look to the leaders of APNU for leadership, and they're using them. And they're deceiving them for their own personal gain. We've seen in the recent last 2 weeks, almost every day Kaichor News has a new big deal that's going on, whether it's the land, whether it's the oil, whether it's it's just unbelievable of where we're at. But the thing about it is this: everybody who speaks out is attacked. Ex-prime ministers of Jamaica, of Barbados, the current prime minister of Barbados, St. Vincent, Rowley from Trinidad, Prime Minister Rowley from Trinidad spoke out.
Yes.
he was
Yes.
wrongly attacked. The ambassadors from the ABCE countries, they're wrongly attacked. The Carter Center, the OAS, the Commonwealth, everybody, even the individuals that attack. And the attacks are getting personal. The attacks are premised on so much fake. And I mean, not to get about me, because I'm the least of the Mohicans involved. But you see all these strange stories popping up. I've seen them. Everybody's seen them on Facebook. That the leadership of the party and I have a quarrel because I want to hold a particular office, and utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. I don't know where people get these stories from, but I give them credit for one thing.
It made you famous?
Not only that, the fiction, Leonard. You are a journalist, and I'm sure you can relate. You know, it's easy to write your copy because you're writing the story of what actually happened. But when you have to make up a story every day of what to write, it could be very, very difficult.
I can't relate to that, so I would ask York to protect me legally on this, that he's casting aspersions.
No, you don't make up. I'm not saying you make up,
I'm
but
just
you
kidding.
can imagine how difficult this is. And they keep making up these interesting stories about me, and I'm almost curious to know what the next one will say. I mean, it has become such a foolish thing. And if you see the things that they say, I mean, my colleagues who are in Guyana that are appearing with me in this matter with the CCJ, it's now a running joke where we have different names for each other, which I'm not allowed to say. But it is a great sense of humor, and we have bets and about what the next version is going to be. And what I was going to say, out of curiosity, I would like to see it as soon as possible, because you would just like to see. But the attacks, that attack, of course, is of one nature. But if you've seen the Private Sector Commission, the GCCI, those attacks are horrible, what they're saying about gentlemen who are speaking up, you know? And the problem is, and the reality is it is true what Greenwich said. If you have to shout someone down to say that you are not doing anything wrong, then the chances are you are doing something wrong.
Of course.
Because you don't need to shout people down if you have done the correct thing. You don't need to shout people down if you have done what you should have done. And if you are morally correct about what you do, you have no fear. You know, the typical thing that they don't understand is for all the lies that are spinning on the web, the average citizen and the average person in Guyana know what's what. I mean, it's like this. If you know you're innocent and the police come to you and they say they want proof of this or proof of that, and show me this and show me that, you don't say that you have the right to remain silent. Most people say, look, show them, and let them go. You know that these are the sorts of things that are what normal right-thinking people do, but they never showed their SOPs. So and now there is nobody quarreling about numbers, about SOPs, about migrant voters, about dead voters. They're not concerned about that. They're concerned that Lowenfield has said they've won the election. That's all they're concerned about. And what they want to do is to defend Lowenfield. I have seen so many people on Facebook and on social media and writing in those pesky blogs about we must all come together and defend Lowenfield. We must all come together and spread this message. We must all... I'm thinking, why is it that every step of the way you have to basically shout everybody out of the way? If
Right.
Kaichor News reports something, you say it's of no value.
Well,
If
but it's
Stavros
what
News report, they're
it's
against.
it's the political call, isn't it? I mean, everybody, as long as you speak out against them, and that tells the media that you are doing a good job. But Council, I wanna, if you don't mind, if we can come to today's hearing and give us one or
Yes.
two moments. And before I ask or invite your comment, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are tuned in today, um, it was an interesting day from an onlooker's perspective. I was looking on, and it was an interesting day. A couple of things that stands out or stood out for me. One, Council, that really stood out for me was when the honorable judges from the CCJ asked the question, had the appeal court used the word invalid instead of valid, would you still have been happy with them retaining jurisdiction? And I tell you, when you look at the body language and the faces of persons, it was amazing. At one stage, I think even the president of the CCJ had to bend his head down to kind of bite it a smile for something that was said. Over to you, Council.
The proceedings, they not wanting to give conclusions or commentary about it, but I will say this to you. The best thing, I think, of this CCJ proceeding, as with the previous one, is you can see why open justice, transparent justice, brings confidence. Now, the judges are human beings, and they confront whatever issues they see that they're being faced with. And some are more direct than others, some are more diplomatic than others, but that's the way of life. That's the way of things. But you could see the level of respect they have for everyone. You don't hear, and I have never and I've been going there for more than a decade. You never hear a judge shouting at a lawyer. You never hear them losing patience, even when the lawyer is being quite obstinate or, clearly not being logical. And you can see why the court has, they conduct their proceedings in a little different way. I say that to say that I would like, and I am been speaking about it and speaking up for it for as long as I can recall, that this is what we need to do in our courts. We need to put those video links in, and we need to have video links of all the proceedings. And no judge should have the right in public proceedings like this to say that the media is not allowed.
That's
and
correct.
no judge should say that you can't broadcast it. Because why not? Look, today I was told, and then I actually texted Leonard about it, and I was told about the thing. It was being streamed by several media houses simultaneously, some with video, as I understand it, some without video, as I understand it. But my guess is, if, from what I heard, and the comments that I have gotten from persons who were texting me to say that I shouldn't be laughing or I shouldn't be, doing things like that, it appears to me that it was being broadcast in so many forms in Guyana that any citizen anywhere who had an interest and wanted to be able to appraise themselves of what was going on could have followed it. It was on television, it was on radio, it was on Facebook Live, it was on it was on every form or every way that it was done. Now, about the proceedings, I think it was very clear to everyone that there were a couple major points. One was the jurisdiction of the court to hear the appeal, because we have seen the concerted, directed public complaint campaign that was going on by the, I'm trying to, Department of Political Information involved, that they were trying to say that, and they were putting snippets of statutes and the Constitution and saying everything is final and there is no jurisdiction,
Right.
and all of this is nonsense. And why are we going here? Why are we doing that? They have no jurisdiction. And they all dismissed all of this, what we were saying. By we, I mean the persons who were challenging the decision and who were involved on the various sides with trying to set aside the decision or arguing for the set aside of the decision. They were saying it was all nonsense. Without me expressing a specific opinion, I, of course, believe that there is a jurisdiction. But I think everyone today, if you looked at those proceedings, you would form your own opinion as to what arguments you heard of why there was jurisdiction and what was the reaction to the various judges as to whether or not there was any jurisdiction in the court. Then there was the issue about what consequential orders should be made if the court has jurisdiction, whether they vacate the order, whether they will strike down Lowenfield's report, whether they will issue some directions to say what should really happen, what Lowenfield should actually do, what give a little bit of a narrative of how to work. You heard all the lawyers presenting all these arguments, and you heard them saying on both sides in great detail. But you also saw for yourself the reaction that some lawyers had and the response that some points that were being raised and some arguments that were being raised in the court versus others. So this was not a situation where it was particularly complicated. I thought the issues were pretty straightforward. I thought the issues were fairly simple. I thought the law that relates to the issues are pretty straightforward and simple too. And it's not a difficult process to see where the conclusion is likely. And I've spoken to several people that I know and who called or texted and were saying, and they were all expressing an opinion as to what they saw happen. But one thing that was common is everybody was happy they were able to see it live, and they didn't have to hear from second or third hand what was going on. Because, to be honest, some of the things you couldn't make up. For example, it was Justice Witt, who you were referring to, who said, would you have a problem if the judge had said all invalid votes? And it proves the point. It proves a particular point as to how could you just say that they could do, a court could rule what they want and you can't do anything to correct it. And this is an apex court. They have to make sure justice is done, even if they need to go further than they have before. I know that the quotation which was said is that hard cases make bad law, but that's not entirely true. Some judges have said before that it's the tough cases that move the needle of the law.
That's
the development of the law,
that's right.
That's your best case to have the development take place. But I thought today the arguments were pretty clear. I thought the limitations of the Court of Appeals judgment were highlighted, and I don't think that that's now everyone's mind would have been disabused that it's about whether an appeal would lay to the court or not. But we will await the ruling of the court. But we have to remember, that notwithstanding what happens in the court,
there is a stay.
There is the stay, one, and two, GCOM still has to do its job, and GCOM has already said, we need you, Mr. CEO, to come to us with a specific thing.
So Sanjeev, just a second. So I want to get to that. Everybody needs to understand that. But before we get to it, let me line it up. One, yesterday, all of social media was, a lot of people of the APNU AFC side, they were pushing the agenda, which I felt they ought to have felt terribly embarrassed when Senior Counsel Mendez took, when he started to speak today. That's sheer brilliance. I mean, not to down talk you guys there as well, but
Oh
when
no,
Mendez
you're
when
you're
Mendez
you're you're
spoke,
preaching to the choir here.
yeah,
I
when Mendez spoke to the
very
jurisdiction, and that explained it so well. It really, it was a bold moment, a moment of light that, here is why this thing is so important. Because if a court of appeal could use other sections to draw an inference from, then that inference itself forms a precedent. So that's one, counsel. Two, if I can borrow a little bit from, I think, Owen Arthur, if I can borrow a little bit from Owen Arthur's words, the utensil. Use the word the utensil. So one of the utensils, would have said all of our attorneys, all the attorneys on our team did an excellent job before the CCJ today. And that has Mr. Harmon's picture next to it that is being shared by APNO ASC. And then the third point, counsel, is tell us exactly, is GCOM delayed in any way from Lowenfield making a final report and giving it to the commission? Is GCOM delayed from making a declaration because of CCJ saying, well, we're going to make this decision, hand down a decision on July 8th?
well. You see, the order of the stay. It wouldn't allow anything to happen except one thing is specifically permitted, and that is for Lowenfield's report to be withdrawn or discarded. But the Lowenfield report,
yes,
the order permits that that Lowenfield can, the commission can say they will not accept that, or for Lowenfield to withdraw the report. To go further with the declarations, etc., that with the stay order that nothing happens, that won't be possible, but the report can be thing. And it was specifically worded as a stay to allow that report to be removed. Because the problem with the report is it is so arbitrary. And I think in the arguments today, several attorneys repeated the same process about it. On what basis? What did he do? Who did he hear? What votes were removed? And on what information he acted? And those are real things. Those are not fanciful things. What information he relied on? As Senior Counsel Douglas Mendez made clear, the evidence he's referring to are various letters from Mr. Harmon, from APNO to exactly. That's not evidence. You wrote the letters and provided no proof to your letters. What evidence are you talking about?
And the letter writer is a party in court.
Well, you can't write a letter and then go to court and say your evidence is your letter. That's self-serving. You would invent evidence. That's self-serving. It's not evidence. In no court at any stage can you create your own thing previous and then go into court and rely on it as the authority.
And that to me was an important moment to counsel. That can you advise whether it was? I know that the honorable judges allowed it, but whether it was procedurally norm that at the last moment after Mendez would have rebutted that what Mr. Williams went in. And he tried to make some very nasty comments, in my view, including what you said there, that he said evidence was tendered. And Mendez quite correctly immediately put him on the spot and say, it is your own letter.
Yeah. In my experience, the way this court functions, and I know it is not strictly speaking in accordance with the accepted procedures, but in my experience, this court would usually do the applicant side, all the respondents. So the applicant make their case, there's an answer from the respondents and a reply from the applicant, and that's usually when it
That's
ends.
it.
But they would usually always provide a 5 or 10 minutes at the end for any party who wishes to say something or to clarify or to say whatever they do. They would usually do that. In my experience, I think more courts should do it. I don't think, however, that you should abuse it to try to relitigate or to
That's right.
do your things, which they're very alert to, as they were today. They said, this was a minute, and it was not to do that. But I think more courts should do that, and it would be useful, because we have to look at things from a point of view. You want to be transparent. You want to be. There's nothing wrong with allowing people to make a point. You don't want them to repeat, and you don't want them to take more time than they should. And that's why it's important that everybody set your time frame so that, you don't speak for 5 hours and I speak for 5 minutes. Then it's not equality of arms. And that's something that we, the court takes a position to give everybody an allotted time and try to keep them there as much as they can. This court, in my experience, when I have gone to the court, they are very much that way. And as Justice Barrow said, they're also flexible, because if they're at you all the time and they're eating up your time with you answering their questions as opposing to doing your presentation, they're very liberal about giving you back it.
Okay.
But in some cases, they're not doing that, and you can't really say, well, you're entitled to more time because of how that was. And I think Justice Barrow highlighted that.
Yes.
And that has been the case that I've noticed when they are at you and they're challenging you for answers on various things, they usually let you go. They don't quarrel you. They give you a little bit more time so that you could do your presentation. But that's what equality and justice means. These are some of the things that we could well do and would improve our system. Broadcast all the proceedings if you want to see it. I know not every proceeding people are really going to want to see, but this one certainly was worth watching.
So, Counsel, Leonard, just before you come in with a question there, Counsel, I wish to also acknowledge, I think that Senior Counsel Ralph Ramkaran, he made an excellent presentation. And also that 10 minutes, of Timothy Jonas was really, really, really well done. Timothy Jonas really came in that 10 minutes, I felt was like a hard knuckle, it was one of those really hard uppercuts, as well as Mr. Kashir Khan. I think all the, even on the other side, I think that the lawyers made good presentations, albeit some of it on very shallow grounds, but you could see the presentations being made there.
Well, it's a case where so much is at stake, so much is on, and usually in this court, people are well prepared to do what they're doing and to get the job done. And I think all of the attorneys who appeared, they did the very best that they could. But I thought, speaking for myself, I really thought that the defending the Court of Appeal and the decision of the Court of Appeal and the way it was an uphill task. I thought it would be a difficult proposition, to be fair. And I thought today, when we had much of the social media and the so-called Facebook lawyers going through things, I thought today, when you saw it and you saw how it unfolded and you saw how things went along, you would realize why much of what was said was really not so. And it's important. It's really important that the leadership in APNU and President Granger stop lying to their supporters. Stop fooling them and giving them false reason to hope on these sorts of things. It's just not so. And what's going to happen? You're going to have an issue when the court is going to rule in a particular way. I believe that most of the people watching have a fair idea about how that went and where it will go to. We'll all wait for it. So the court is going to rule in a way. Then we're going to have GCOM having to decide on the way forward and pushing on forward with what it is. But we all know what the recount numbers are. We know in great detail what the recount numbers are. And that's not going to change when the declaration comes. Leading people to say that you were cheated because of dead or migrant voters, and you've repeated it so much, and you have so deceived the people who look to you for leadership that they're beginning to believe it.
Yes.
They're believing your lies because you've repeated it. Now, this is not a trick. This is not a propaganda issue. This is the livelihood of an entire nation. This is not a joke. And it's a very serious thing. And we have to realize that we could keep screaming from the top of our lungs if we want that foreigners should not interfere. I thought that Mr. Greenidge was very clear that foreigners are entitled to intervene, but I want people to realize the APNU supporters says that, look, half of the people of the country, they speak for them, which is like 48% or 47%, something like that. They speak for them, and they are saying they don't want foreign interference. But 51% of the country who voted for the PPP, they welcome the foreign intervention because they're saying, without the foreign intervention, we're going to be bullied. We're going to be taken advantage of, and we need your support. And you could see that. So how could the minority effectively have the right to say, well, oh, leave our country alone? Don't the majority have the right to say, come help us?
Right.
And this is the kind of thing. And you have to realize, anyone who looked, I looked at most of yesterday when time permitted, and even during the evening, except for the gentleman who spoke French at the ICJ of Guyana versus Venezuela. I looked at most of it. You realize essentially what the whole thing is? There was an arbitral award. At that arbitral award, Guyana lost territory to Venezuela. We have gone on. Venezuela made an agreement with us that this is the borders. Guyana has honored it. Guyana lost a large part of the Orinoco. Years later, they have come forward and say, we don't agree with this anymore. They then said the UN Secretary General should pick the court, how to do the resolution of the dispute. Secretary General Perez de Cuellar in the 1980s, he chose. We had 2 treaties before that, 2 agreements. He chose the court. They came to the court, made submissions, and then they decided not to come. The reality is, how are we going to enforce all of that? I mean, it has many parallels to what's going on here, where people have agreed to a position, and when it don't go their way, they want a different position. We agreed to CARICOM. CARICOM came here, we want something else. When GCOM says that this is what we should do, we say, no, we want to do this. We keep changing the goalposts all the time, whether we're obeying the Constitution. But it's very similar to what Venezuela's position and how they're going about it.
Right. So
they don't want to obey it now, so they expect.
That's right.
But how are we going to enforce that, Yoke? Don't we need the international community to stand with us, to stand with what is right? And that is why Greenidge was right. Separate sovereignty from politics. You're not doing the right thing in your country, which is why other countries are obliged to speak up, to say you're not respecting the rights of your people and you're infringing their human rights by not doing that. But at the same time, you must understand that in the fight that we have with Venezuela, Venezuela has clearly indicated that they want to treat with it in a certain way. We are going to have to rely on the international community and the international leaders and the leaders of the more powerful nations to be protected from what appears to be the position that Venezuela seems intent on.
And I
Now,
don't.
we have
Mhm,
to do that.
mhm.
So we don't want them to tell us about our elections, but we want them to tell Venezuela how to treat us. I mean, it doesn't work that way.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Leonard, you had wanted to.
Yes, a couple of things. Thank you very much there. And I think the good counsel has a very good point there. I think nobody's really paying attention to that, the role of the international community in the Venezuela issue there, and why we should be dependent on. I think Carl Greenwich, who's been around the block in Africa and around the places in the diplomatic circles, would have a very, very clear understanding as to what is at stake here. But I want to tell the people while we are looking at the political ball at the CCJ and at the ICJ there, a couple of things happened today in Guyana. That is, our airports are going to be closed another month. At least it was supposed to be open today partially, and they have come out with a statement. There's a civil aviation authority and says no, because of the high rise in the number of COVID cases, we are going to have to close it for another month. I think 6 or 7 persons would have come in from Miami. But my question to the good counsel, I just want to tell the people that my question to the council next week Wednesday is going to be that ruling or the decision by the Caribbean Court of Justice. What happens then? Have you put it in your mind? Let's assume everything is in order for the People's Progressive Party, or there is a particular positive direction from that court. What timeline are we looking at that maybe we could have a new president or a president being sworn in?
I would put it to you this way. Once the ruling is made, the statutory mechanism is still for GCOM to make their decision, make their declaration. Now, GCOM has telegraphed to the whole world there is no dispute. Mr. Lowenfield, go and prepare your report to us in accordance with the recount data. That to me is clear. Don't add nothing. Don't subtract nothing. Don't invent nothing. Just please total and calculate the seats. Now, that shouldn't take any time at all for that to be completed. Once that declaration is made, then the swearing in should take place shortly thereafter. So if the decision is done and the way is clear for GCOM GCOM is still clear during this time to reject the report, or Lowenfield can withdraw the report. I know there are criminal proceedings in relation to the report. I don't want to get into much about it, but withdrawing the report wouldn't be the worst thing he does for himself in these circumstances. Because if you think of the reality of it, don't take this to be anything more than me just giving you an outline of speculatively of what it is. But this is it. If you go produce a report and you are sitting and you are counting corn, and everybody is sitting with you counting corn, and they have 250 corn there, and you have to report to your boss how much corn there, and you go there and say there is 200, and your boss says that he's going to charge you, or someone comes and charges you for a fraudulent report. I am not sure what you can do except say, sorry, boss, I meant to write 250 down.
Right.
And I wrote 200 instead.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could set about trying to prove that what everybody else saw was wrong and that you were entitled to put your own number down on this report that you did. Now, the reality is if that someone is alleged that you've committed fraud, in that example, you better find the other 50
Right.
corn.
Right.
You understand?
Right.
You better
Yes.
find it. Because if you don't, you will get free room and board for a little while. You are on these electioneering offenses, these offenses which are at common law, they range from 2 years in prison to more. depending on what it is. Now, there is one thing that I wish to say to you that could pose a serious problem. The counts of how many counts of fraud you do could be cumulative. And if you get more than 3, then it could be life imprisonment.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are issues with that. But I don't want to speculate about how many counts or whatever. The charges that are against Lowenfield, for example, are very simple charges: misconduct in public office. At common law and under our statute, when you are a public officer, you have a duty to perform. If you are a public officer driving a bus, I don't expect you to have anything to do with flying the planes. The law does not expect you to do anything except drive the damn bus. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you are a public officer, your duty is a little wider than when you work for private companies by virtue of a contract. And the reason for that is every member of the public is effectively, I mean, in theory, it's not actual, so it's a legal fiction, is your employer. Everybody pays your wages. So you have to act in a certain way and differently than you would if you were like a private employer, because then you really only need to look after whoever is your boss.
Correct.
But now you have a whole country of bosses. If you think about it that way, you will realize why the nature of the transaction changes. Now, a public officer cannot do what is unreasonable. And there's a case called Wensbury Cooperation from a House of Lords decision from England that has set the tone for that. And it also says that public officers, before they take away any right any man has, any member of the public, you have to obey a rule. The Latin term is audi alteram partem, which means you must give them a hearing. And that's why a hearing is important. So, for example, you know that there are many of these instances, like in the Clarence Chew case and customs officers or police officers, where, for example, you would want to dismiss them, but you don't give them a hearing and you just dismiss them. That's not really allowed. Well, that's just not really allowed. That's unlawful. You understand? You have to give them a hearing. You have to hear what they want to say for themselves. So, as far as I'm aware, the 115,000 people whose votes were erased were never given a hearing. Now, no public officer can embark upon that process and claim that it is reasonable by any stretch of the imagination. Now, the real misconduct will come when what you are doing is for a specific purpose. How are you going to show that it's not for a specific purpose when A, you have produced effectively more than one set of numbers? 4 in all, I think. 4 sets of numbers, I believe it is. So here's your problem. The one set of numbers that is reflective of the recount data that the whole world has seen and that was broadcast live, you're saying don't take it. Don't accept it. But you have no evidence or proof, one. And you've given 3 other sets of numbers, if my reckoning is correct, all of which are skewed towards one interest.
Council,
So
we got a minute more to go to close up, so we are running out of time.
No, I just wanted to
final
say
words.
to you that,
Yeah.
that I just wanted to say to you that these criminal proceedings are serious. And having regard to them, it will be best served if Lowenfield would be best served if he were to think about his future in that regard. And think about what will happen about penalties that are going to go on.
Of course.
I would hope that better sense prevails. Leonard, I hope that the CCJ makes a ruling that clears up this issue of the Court of Appeal, but that GCOM goes forward really quickly. Don't fix for 10 o'clock the next morning. You know,
Great.
it's finished. Move forward. Get your
Mhm.
data. Tell your CEO, you've
Mhm.
already told him what to do. Tell him what's expected of him. Declare, move forward. If you have all these concerns,
Indeed.
file your petition.
Indeed. And go forward we must. Ladies and gentlemen, Council, first of all, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I know you've had a long day. To my co-host, Leonard Gildari, thank you, sir, for being with us. Kaichur Radio Technical Team, Kevin Smith, Joshua Van Slightman, and everyone, thank you all. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us in room 592 tonight, and we certainly look forward for your company again tomorrow at 1:30. Elections Watch, COVID-19 Watch. Do have a wonderful night. Stay safe. Do a
Thank
prayer
you,
for this lovely country of ours.
Thank you, Leonard.
Thank you
And
very much.
thank you all.
Good night.
Good night,
May God
everyone.
be with you. Good night to you.
Bye-bye
listeners.
now.